Hello and welcome to Walking the Weird. Thank you so much for joining me for another walk. Today I'm in Somerset and I've come to Farleigh Hungerford Castle. This castle has got so many dark stories, so much dark history, so let's get into it. The romantic ruin of Farleigh Hungerford Castle sits in the peaceful county of Somerset, a place where it's hard to imagine the dark history that took place here. The Hungerford family owned the castle for 300 years, and in that time, cruelty and strife seemed to follow them throughout history. The castle was built by Sir Thomas Hungerford around 1370. Sir Thomas was an important person who appeared in many prestigious circles and was a speaker for the House of Commons. He built the castle as a status symbol, a beacon of his wealth and friendships in high places, rather than a fortification. The family status seemed to be on the rise after their bravery at the Battle of Agincourt. However, during the War of the Roses, the Hungerford family lost ownership of the castle by backing the Lancastrian cause. Later, the castle was returned to Sir Edward Hungerford, whom had a very good relationship with King Henry VIII, having served him at the Field of the Cloth of Gold in 1520. The castle continued to be passed down through generations of successors, including Walter III, who was executed at London Tower. The castle's last owner was Sir Edward Hungerford IV, who lies in the crypt below the chapel. He was also known as the Spendthrift. His love of spending landed him in financial difficulties in 1686, forcing him to sell the castle. The castle was sold for salvage in 1705, and then by the early 1800s, it became a place of interest for curious visitors. So you can see there's the gatehouse there on the left-hand side, that's the gatehouse, and then you've got this first line of defence, and then you've got this second inner gatehouse, which is where the towers are, and yeah, there would have been a small moat as well around the castle for extra defences. And I expect those defences came into play during the Civil War. So to the right here, this is sort of like the entertaining area, the dining rooms and the halls, the great halls as well, are just here. They would have entertained their guests, probably quite a few members of high status and dignitary would have come here. And they also had their own source of water. They had their own well, which was always handy when you've got a castle. You don't even need to go and fetch any water. So this part here is the kitchen. So somewhere here is the oven that poor old John, Agnes's murdered husband, got burnt into. So let's talk about Agnes Cottle. So she became Edward Hungerford's second wife. When Edward met Agnes, she was actually a widow, and how she became a widow is quite a dark piece of history here. With the help of two servants, Agnes had her first husband, John, strangled, and then his body was put into the kitchen furnace here at the castle so that his remains could not be found. Edward Hungerford actually protected Agnes from being tried for her crimes, and it's thought maybe he had a hand in it because they went on to marry each other. When he died in 1522, Agnes came to trial and her aides did as well, and they were taken in 1523 to Tyburn in London, where all three of them were hanged. And it's supposed to be her ghost that can be seen walking around the grounds of this castle, particularly around the area of the chapel. Maybe she's here to repent for her sins. So let's talk about why the Lady Tower, which is just behind me there, is called the Lady Tower. Again, it's dark. After Sir Edward's death, Walter, at the age of just 20, became the new Lord Hungerford in 1536. He was a loyal aide to Thomas Cromwell, and again he appeared in many important circles in court. The father of Walter's third wife, Elizabeth, had fallen out of favour at court, and particularly with Henry VIII himself. Because of this, Walter decided to take this out on his wife Elizabeth. So, for her father's misdemeanours, Elizabeth became imprisoned by her husband in the tower on the southwest corner of the castle. Elizabeth was actually imprisoned here for 3 years, and she survived purely by drinking her own urine and by eating any morsels of food that were brought to her by some of the ladies in waiting and also by some of the priests. Elizabeth wrote to Thomas Cromwell explaining her plight and pleading for his help because, he was friends with her husband Walter, so she thought this could help. Her letter was actually quite damning to Walter, and she accused him of inappropriate relationships, and particularly there's a hint that it may well have been with other men, and maybe even Thomas Cromwell himself. Elizabeth pleaded to Cromwell to grant her a divorce to Walter, but he just ignored it. At the end of the day, what could a woman locked in a tower possibly do? However, Cromwell got his comeuppance, and in 1540 he was arrested for treason for other reasons, other things that were going on within Henry VIII's court. And this period of time marked the downfall of Walter Hungerford too. The abuse of Walter's wife came to light, and he was also accused of denouncing Henry VIII as a heretic and of employing a witch or alternative doctor to predict when the king would die. He was also accused, now don't be offended by this, it's a real thing, of buggery, which was illegal under the Buggery Act of 1533, another thing that the Tudors brought in. So in 1540, Walter was arrested, tried for treachery, sorcery and buggery. On July 28, 1540, both Thomas Cromwell and Walter Hungerford were taken to Tower Hill, where they were beheaded. Their heads were put onto spikes and were lined up along London Bridge as a reminder and warning to others not to upset Henry VIII. The chapel of St Leonard's was created in the early 1440s from the remains of the older parish church by Walter, 1st Lord Hungerford. Indeed, Walter also expanded the castle grounds, adding the outer court, towers and gatehouses. This doubled the size of Farleigh Hungerford Castle. Wow. And it's got these incredible paintings, wall paintings, which are original. Look at those. So this one here depicts St George slaying the dragon. Look at that. So here we've got these incredible effigies. So this one here is of Sir Thomas and Lady Joanna Hungerford. Oop. And then around here, the marble ones, which are just stunning. Look at these. So you've got Edward Hungerford. I think it said the first Edward, because there was a few. And next to him is his wife, Margaret Hungerford. And he's wearing his armour. Now, I read that some of the stained glass is actually original, which is incredible. Some of it is a bit newer. I'm not an expert, I don't know which is which, but that is really beautiful work. Really just shows the importance of this family to have not only their own castle, but also their own chapel, their own place of worship. So shortly we'll go and find the crypt, which should be underneath the chapel, I believe. Let's go and see.
In the crypt below the chapel are 8 gruesome-looking lead coffins. The coffins contain the remains of the Hungerford family and include men, women, and children. When taking a closer look, you can see death masks carved into the faces of the coffins.
The Victorian visitors to this crypt were fascinated just like we were, and they came to have a look at these perfect sort of lead coffin tombs. And inside the tombs are still the remains of the bodies, the corpses, and they're infused and embalmed with spirits, so liquor, alcohol. And it became kind of a fascination in the Victorian period. Obviously they loved the macabre, kind of dark, gothic type things. And guests that came here in the Victorian times were offered an extra to the tour of the crypts, and this was that they drilled holes into the lead coffins and they removed a sample of the fluid from inside. Obviously that's a mixture of what was left of the corpse and the spirits that they were preserved in. And that's not where it ended. The Victorians were offered to taste the liquid. Why, I have no idea, but I found that information on the English Heritage website, so I'm pretty sure it's more than just folklore. But yeah, fancy that, eh? Little tasting session down here. How extraordinary. And the reason these tombs are so special as well is because they were the perfect shape for the body. So they held the body really tight in its perfect form, in the hope that when the trumpets blow at the resurrection, that the bodies would be able to be resurrected as they were. So this here is the priest's house, which was built in 14 1830 to house the Treachery priest, and now, and now it's a museum. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today in Somerset at Farleigh Hungerford Castle. I do hope you've enjoyed having a look at this beautiful ruined castle and to hearing all the dark history behind it. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please do consider doing so. It'd be most appreciated. And I'll see you all again on the next Weird Walk.